as the podcast roars dangerously close to hitting episode 200, that's an issue in itself. I'm going to have to work out what I want to do with episode 200 and then what to do with the podcast beyond that, because that is a lot of episodes. That's a bridge we'll cross when we come to it. Today, we have such a wonderful opportunity to speak with a photographer that is just so iconic, and I'm such an enormous fan. I'm going to do my best to not be completely overwhelmed the entire way through this interview, although I'm not making any promises. As we do with all of these, before we get started with sort of getting into the details of things, your work and your subjects and so on, let's start off with why you picked up a camera in the first place, and what was it that made you want to become a photographer?
I come from a family that is, my mom and dad met on art school. So if you don't do anything artistic in my family, you weren't really invited for the Christmas party in a certain way. And I just couldn't really draw. My sister is really good with this. And sometimes she was even correcting my drawings when I was younger. And it was obviously, I couldn't really find an identity with it. I don't really know how I got into photography because it was actually really early. I picked it up. I think I was around 10 or 11. And I was literally starting with every cliche in the book, doing the prints in my mother's bathroom, and every soap and every shampoo smelled like developer, and everybody got mad at me. And I didn't know how to remove the red filters, so all my pictures came out white because I didn't know that you have to take that thing off. So, you could really say I started at the bottom, and I probably done the worst prints anyone ever seen, in the sense that there was nothing on it. But it was definitely something that how when you're in high school or when you're younger, all the kids are sort of like inclined to really do anything. Some are really into sports, and some of them are really into whatever, horse riding, or already in the math club. And I was already really into photography. Every school project that was sort of around, art was the only thing I was good at in school. And I think it's also because I have a very hard time putting my energy into something that I'm not interested in. And it really breaks you in school because you have to, pay attention to so many different aspects, and maybe they turn into something interesting, but I couldn't get myself to do it. So I was always very focused on photography. And because few things can really hold my attention, I got actually thrown out of school as a teenager. I think I was about 16. They asked me to leave, to put it in nice terms. So I was a bit of a troubled kid. I was on the street, and the family didn't know what to do with me. And the story goes that to go to art school, which obviously was kind of an institution in my family, because this is where my parents met, and my sister was in art school. But I didn't have a degree. Since I didn't finish school, I couldn't really join because they only take people with a degree. Now, they did have something, it's kind of like a special talent clause,
right?
Meaning that, to go to art school in the town where I was, or Germany, you have to score like 50 points.
Right.
And they said if you score 100, they take you anyway, even without a degree or without a diploma. So my mom said, you need to try this because, you need to get off the street. And I did, and I got 99, so they didn't take me. So my mom was really worried. And because I was also hanging, I was like 16, I wanted to be a gangster. I was hanging out with the wrong people. Being a gangster, meaning that I was like stealing, pretzels and pizza, that was as hard as it got. And so my mom went to the principal, and she says, why are you doing this? Why do you, that's personal. Why are you depriving him of this one point? It cannot be about that. Plus you take all the others with 50. And the guy said to my mom, look, there's obviously a point to this because we think he's too young. Because everybody else finished school, they're in their early 20s, and your son is 16. We think he doesn't fit in yet. And we think for 1 or 2 years at least, he should do an intern, do something that he's passionate about, And we clearly give them the signal, you're good enough, come back. But we don't have any 16-year-olds in our school. It just didn't happen. And we think it's going to create a problem.
Right.
And that kind of like made sense. And I happen to know some girl I knew was the girlfriend of a photographer. And somehow she got me to be his assistant. Now, I didn't know anything. I didn't know a camera from a vacuum cleaner really on a professional level. But I worked with this guy for a first day, and he was nice. And I, tell you the truth, at the end of the day, he drove me to the subway, and he says, "Look, you can come back tomorrow." And before I got out of the car, I looked at him and I thought, look, the guy got a girlfriend, he's got a car, he's got a job. And he was like 26, 27. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a photographer. This sounds like it seems to be a good life. Mm-hmm. And since I got out of that car, I never changed my mind. That was just the road I took. And eventually, the guy fired me after like a couple of months, but he teach me the basics. He teach me how to use a Mamiya RZ, which is still the camera actually I'm using today. So I never changed on that. And then then I did a couple of other small assistant jobs. And eventually the guys from art school asked me to come back and to do another test. But somehow I wanted to go to New York and become a photo assistant. And then I was like, between 17, 18 back then. And I was really lucky because my mom says, okay, look, I get you $1,000. That's all I got. And go for it, and I think like 300 or something of the money went for the ticket, and the rest went to the YMCA on 34th Street. And I went to New York and worked as an assistant, and that's how things sort of like started rolling, and I was like, I think I was 18. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that comes up quite often with this, and I think it's a really interesting kind of fork in the road for a lot of people. They become a photographer and then they are deciding whether or not they want to photograph people. It seems to be quite a big thing. You get people that go into like wildlife, landscape, street photography is, kind of the bridging area, I guess, because they're not really photographing people, but they are. But it seems to be that a lot of people are either afraid or very against photographing people. So what was it specifically about photographing people that drew you in?
It was never a choice. I never even thought that you can photograph anything else than people, to tell you the truth. I think it was really later in my life that I realized you do not have to photograph people. There's actually something else. Right. It was like I was raised on Italian food and I didn't think there would be anything beyond that. And I have to tell you, when I was really like when this whole thing happened, this whole process, I had one book my dad gave to me, which was Time Life, Best of Time Life. And it was a huge influence on me because it was kind of like Time Life, street photography, kind of like a random shot. But, there was war photography, some fashion, some celebrity, really good guys in there. And it had a huge impact on me. Those images became, so I think when you're younger, you're creating within everything that's been given and brought to you, but your biography creates a certain mythology. Now, you may be more or less not aware of it, but it kind of sneaks into your system, your ideals, your aesthetics. And another thing that was back in the day very influential on me was my father was very keen, because he was kind of like a post-war kid that was very idolizing American culture. My father was really always watching these old black and white films.
Right.
And my mom was kind of more into the French 1960s movies. Now, I'm born 69, and somehow these films were given to me or were like explained to me as something extremely valuable. Cinema was always given to me as an art. And I think I was digesting this. So for me, that was always a guideline. And I think if I look at my images today, I am a little bit freaked out how much that is still there, and how little I got away from it in a certain way, you know. But I think because the cinematic influence as a teenager or even before was so strong, it was always about photographing people like they've been shot on film.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things that I love. There's the quote on your website, which I'll just read verbatim so that I don't put my own spin on it. But it says, you don't make a photograph with just a camera. You bring to the act of photography all the pictures you have seen, the books you have read, the music you have heard, and the people that you've loved. And this is like, I find this so fascinating is a lot of people I've spoken to through the podcast don't really talk about influence outside of photography. And I think it's a really big deal. The world that you expose yourself to has a huge influence on what you're producing, whether you like it or not. It's going to be a subconscious thing and it's going to get through.
It's everything. I really think it's everything. I think photography has nothing to do with photography and with the pictures you take. Your whole life somehow finds its way into your pictures. Right. And I think the example to use here is really the tip of the iceberg. You know, the picture is just the smallest tip that peaks across above the water. But everything you are, there's such an unconscious manifestation in your images that I would say you don't understand the pictures through yourself. You understand yourself through the pictures. Right. When you look at your photographs, you're trying to question, why did I shoot this? And that's what it should be. The more you're connecting a photograph to your biography, and I really mean everything. I mean, you know, humiliations. I mean, travels. I mean, you know, past lovers. That is what defines, you know, it somehow looks back at you, you know? Yeah. And I think, you know, look, a photograph has been taken so quickly, let's say an average of 125th of a second. But in that intuitive part, in that 125th of a second, it's an unconscious moment meeting a conscious moment. You're not really aware what you're doing in that speed, but there is something there that you feel. When I shoot, and because I still shoot analog mostly, I feel this is a good shot. That was a good click. And I got it. And most of the times I'm right. When I'm in set and you take a lot of shots and you work and you know, that was it. And then you also say, fuck, that was not really, something was missing, but it could have been pretty good. But it's a very intuitive process. And then I think we have to ask ourselves, where does the intuition come from? You know?
I mean, you say it's intuitive, but one thing I find difficult myself, and obviously I can only speak from my own experiences, is that I seem to have a battle between my unconscious and my brain trying to direct where everything's going. So I'm almost fighting my own intuition on things because I'm second guessing myself and thinking that things, I tend to look at my own work very externally. I tend to look at it as if I'm someone else looking at my work and how would they judge it, which I think is, I mean, I don't know, but it feels like that's the completely wrong way to go about things, because then you're being very sort of unnecessarily critical and you're also inhibiting your own influence a little bit.
Well, you know, look, I think maybe that struggle is your creativity. You know, maybe you have to embrace it rather than reject it, because look, there's an interesting part because like I said, for me, you really understand yourself through the photography you do. You don't photograph the way things are. You don't look at the way things are, you know, you photograph the way you are. You know, you look at things the way you are. It's not what they are. You know, this is how you see them. You know, they could be completely different in somebody else's eyes, you know? Yeah. And I think, you know, if you look at, you know, there's an interesting theory from Karl Jung, who was sort of like the counterpart to Freud in the 20s, 30s. And he developed a certain personality profile. He was actually the one that came up with an introverted and an extroverted personality. While I think obviously those terms really became such a part of our life right now, but what he really means that the extrovert is defining life more through what he sees, for what's out there, his logic, his decisions. It's sort of based on, you know, what is in front of him, while the introvert is mainly making his decisions out of his, you know, out of his sort of like emotional insides. He's more detached from the outside. And I think these are just different personalities we have. And I think, yeah, we can fight them and there might be a certain energy there. I work very intuitively, but I also really appreciate people who take a lot. And if you work intuitively, you don't take so much control because you're sort of just like guiding yourself through there. You know, like you're going through a city and you say, let's go here. Right. You know, that feels right. And I think if you work very, very, extroverted, you just say, no, I want to go there. This looks good. I have to go to that spot. This is the goal, Yeah. So you're more result orientated, maybe to a certain point, but I think there's no value. Both of them can be good. And I think if you're struggling with something, I think, embracing the struggle, I think most of the good people struggle, and I think it's literally that struggle that made him good. I mean, I think Charles Bukowski made his whole career out of defining his own struggle with himself, and he's probably not the only one.
So this is getting nice and deep, and I'm definitely not of a high enough IQ probably to keep up with this, but I'm going to do my best. Was there a point really, because I think young men are quite turbulent. Young men they're very energetic in very different ways, and I think men can have tunnel vision quite a lot of the time. They get one thing in mind, they're very focused, they tend to neglect other parts of their life. And as they mature, at least I hope it's going to happen to me at some point, as they mature, they get better at kind of being at peace with certain things and being a little bit more, I don't think vague's the word, but being a little bit more general as opposed to being so focused on one thing. Was there a point with yourself where you became more comfortable in yourself and you became a better photographer because of it?
Well, I think, I think we more or less shooting the way the world we like to live in. I think that's already a certain psychological mirroring, because most of us shoot the women we like to meet, or we shoot the men we want to talk to, or we shoot the landscapes we like to live in, or at least the ones that fascinate us. I mean, you can have a repulsive attitude towards life and you kind of like think it's dangerous and fascinating, or you can have a very attractive attitude towards life. When you meet somebody and you said, oh, you maybe you right now, you said, yeah, I got this invitation, I'm going to go to China for like a weekend. Somebody's going to tell you, oh, really, China? It's really dangerous. I mean, it's kind of like a communist state. And somebody else may say, oh my God, that's so great. I always wanted to go there, Yeah. And what's interesting is that really that's a basic door. It's a basic gateway to life. You will find this in a lot of things. I mean, Corona really kind of like cleared it to the top. You find people in a very irrational situation where a virus where you can't see, and everybody is exposed to it in the same way. But you will find people that are very comfortable with it. And they're like, nah, don't worry about it. You don't need to wear the mask. And there's some people like, oh my God, excuse me, can you please keep a distance? Yeah. So I think there is a basic attitude in life that is in us. And I think maybe you arrange yourself more with it. But I do really like the energy. If to be a bit more concrete about your question, like my photography, I wanted to be an artist in the beginning, and I was so poor. I was literally picking up fruits off the street. And I realized in my mid-20s that this is just not the way to go. And I broke up with a girlfriend. And I had no money. And I really just became a fashion photographer, or what I say, a commercial photographer. There was a certain anger in it. I say, okay, you don't want me to be an artist. I was literally like looking at life and I say, okay, you want me to do this? Okay, I'm gonna do everything you want and you're gonna fucking pay me for it. And there was a certain anger. I said, I'm gonna pay my bills. I'm tired of being poor. And I did. And I was ran over by my own success. I don't know. I was ready for it. I was shooting Saint Laurent and Bottega Veneta, Mio Mio within 3 years. I never really assisted on that level. I don't know if I was ready for the level I was working on to be like a world exposed Vogue cover shooting photographer. I don't think I was ready for it, looking back today. But you've been pulled in so many directions. If you've been paid money and you meet famous people and you just really, when you drive a car so fast that when you make one mistake, you're going to fly off the curve. Right. And it's fun and it's adrenaline, but you're always on the edge with it. And you don't really know where you're going because you're not really enjoying the ride because you're so connected, you're so just busy staying in the seat, And there was a moment in photography where I I just, I think photography is a bit like a relationship. You've been, if you live together, in the beginning, it's the big love. And then, the everyday takes over and you've been pulled in so many different directions. Maybe you have kids, or maybe you have different problems, or you change jobs. And one day you just don't recognize the relationship, and then you either let go, or I think, I didn't want to let go of photography. And I said, what made me love this so much? Like one day I looked at this and I said, I'm going to do this all my life. Life is a valuable thing, man. We only have one of it.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to go back to, like I said, like when you look at a person and you said, there was something with you that nobody else had for me. And it used to be there, and it's about to be gone. So I went back to the photography that I really loved, the influences, which is clearly also very black and white. I still shoot analog. I made a lot of commercial compromises because I knew I'm going to cut myself into a niche. But I had to admit to myself that this is what keeps me going. And if photography is just a service, if you just do it for the money, the pictures you're not really proud of, you kind of like do what needs to be done, and what other people tell you to do, you do it good, but it's not your shot. It's commissioned work, and the money is gone very quickly, so you might sit there in a cafe with an empty nothing,
Right.
So there was a time when, maybe a little bit stubborn, I don't know if it was the right decision, but I just really wanted to be the photographer that made me become a photographer,
Mm. I mean, so this sort of heading towards your work. This classic Hollywood lighting is something that you don't see a tremendous amount of anymore, certainly not in Hollywood. You said it is obviously an influence from your dad watching old Hollywood movies. What is it specifically about the lighting that you like what it does with subjects?
I always responded to light. It's just, it's my access to things. I mean, I think we all have an access. If we do, hopefully you have an access to things, because like I said, let's say you're really inclined in architecture, and you go to Hong Kong and you see the buildings and the texture, and then you go from Hong Kong to Venice. Couldn't be any different, but still you're interested in the architecture. You kind of like say, I mean, look how they did it, and like, the Baroque age. And then maybe you go to Berlin, and you're thinking, oh, man, look at the architecture, or you're interested really in food,
Right.
But that curiosity is your door to life. And if that curiosity dries up, you're probably dealing with some kind of a burnout or depression, because your door to life is closing. You're not looking at Hong Kong. Suddenly Hong Kong is just a big gray city, or Berlin or Venice is just kind of old, You need to have that spark, And for me, it was really the lighting,
Right.
I mean, I always loved women. It's true. Maybe that comes from that sort of like Hollywood-ish mythology. And I really think it's fascinating how light is changing the reality of things. If it's I can give you the dumbest example of a rainy or a sunny day, but things aren't the same, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Light has a big impact on mood as much as anything else. It's not just, I think a lot of people see light as being a technical thing that is almost like emotionless, but actually it has a huge sway on emotion. And I think if you watch a lot of, nowadays it's kind of hard in terms of movies, because I feel like we're in a bit of a mixed age of cinema, because a lot of stuff is kind of products made to sell to people. And then there's a lot of great movies being made, but they're sometimes a little bit harder to find. But yeah, light has a huge impact on emotion.
But that's a very strong point you're making there. Light is not, it's nothing else than an emotional translation for you.
Right.
You will not see the light. You don't see what it is. Again, you don't see things for who they are. You see things for the way you interpret them, and the lighting of it will be a huge matter of interpretation. And that even counts for the person. You can light them in so many different ways, and they have a different character. They're different people,
Yeah.
And obviously there were certain times about like the Renaissance, Caravaggio had a certain sense of lighting. And I think it's true. Hollywood created in that particular time, they celebrated a certain sense of lighting. They invented it. It wasn't there before, movies only, arrived in the late 19th century, and they invented this type of way of creating something, and it's true. I somehow just emotionally really respond to it. I mean, if I have an hour, I watch a B movie, somewhere, some old film, and tell you the truth, I hate it sometimes. I want to get out of it. I want to be more cool. I want to do something else, but it's just not me, man,
So in terms of subjects, the work that I love of yours, there's the stuff that really resonates with me is that of actors and actresses. And I feel like we're in a bit of an interesting phase because we had the huge supermodel boom of the 90s, and that has kind of completely dissipated into celebrities being models as opposed to models being celebrities. I feel like it's gone kind of the other way around, where actors, musicians, and then bizarre sort of idea of influencers, which I still don't really fully understand personally, but have become the models now. In terms of your position as a photographer on set, what's the difference between photographing someone who is, without wanting to sound derogatory, just a model, compared to photographing someone that's an actor or an actress?
Well, I think, there's just a different approach. A model is obviously more of a canvas. You creating really your own scenario with her, and her job is to sort of like to bring that to life, and I think it would be more visual. See, and a good model will always bring something in it, I think, if you read her, but I think it will be more, I think, you will tell a story also in that sense more through appearance.
Right.
And I think it's true. It's always surprising. The reason why good actors are good actors is because they having that charisma. And that is bringing something to the set that is very dominating for your story, But again, if you sort of interpret it, you can create your story around it. If you have Tom Cruise in a film or Charlize Theron, there's always a large part that it's Charlize or Tom, and then you have your scenario, patched up with it. And hopefully if these two mix, it could be a very incredibly beautiful synthesis,
Yeah.
And I think with the model, you will not have these strong counterparts between story and character, because he will blend in more. But I think you have, like I said, you have a larger space of a canvas, which is, like I said, maybe you just want to do something more abstract. Maybe it's not just about that character. Maybe you want to, you want to hint things. You want to be more symbolic about something. It's very hard to take like a symbolic shot that is just suggesting something when you do it with John Malkovich, because it's a shot of John Malkovich.
Yeah.
So I think and I think it's true. The thing is, like lately, but I think it's also the interesting thing is what you say. Models wanted to be celebrities, but celebrities always wanted to be shot like models. That was sort of like the late thing. All the celebrities want the Vogue covers and do the perfume ads, and all the women want to. If you tell a girl, "I'm going to shoot you like a Victoria's Secret" 5 years ago, every actress would be like, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go for that concept." So it was also kind of a flattering, it was a flattering idea. Where at the same time, if you go to a model and you said, "I shoot you like a Hollywood star," they're like, "Oh great, I love that."
Do you think we're missing the supermodels now?
Yeah, because I think what we're missing, Christopher, is the mystery. The wonder is gone. And I think if you dissect it too much, in the 1940s and 50s, when this, I think, look, how do I say that? A celebrity is not a person. A celebrity is a desire. There is a longing for something. He's having a function in your life about a void.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see when celebrity were invented, like in the 1920s, there was the first sort of like Rudolph Valentino, Mary Pickford. It's coming from the Great American Depression. people had nothing and they were projecting on these stars. The idea of the star system really started to work during the American Depression and similar Weimar Republic in Germany and all that. And then you see also another really like boom of it. Seriously, obviously just came again in the 1940s and 50s, when we had this post-war idea. So I think you have to see that again a little bit what I said before about subjects in general, but I think we also have to be clear about that the idea of a celebrity, is that they're a part of you, but they're just a little better. They're just that one thing in you that you can never be. And I think that's why they're coming alive in us. We imagine ourselves as these. And I think a model is a very clever thing because celebrities, obviously some of them killed themselves, some of them went haywire. With the model, you just create a celebrity where you have a lot more control. They're more exchangeable, Right. And I think also you can see, for example, Hollywood found out with Rudolph Valentino when he killed himself or when he died. I think he killed himself, right? That it doesn't really, with James Dean, it doesn't really matter if a star is dead or alive, There's no difference. People still think he's great. And they thought with James Dean, for example, and also with Valentino, that the movies they already made, nobody's going to watch them. Why would people watch a dead person? And then they found out there's no difference. An opposite. An image of a dead person is almost easier to control. Yeah. And I think the idea of a model is always, they're very easy to control. Yet they've been told what to do. They've been easier to, they've been more disposable. If a model makes a problem, you can just book another one, which is much harder with Elvis or with, Marlon Brando,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I will steer this back towards photography, but this is just so fascinating. With social media, everybody, I literally had someone last week who I don't know message me about a conversation I was having on the podcast about social media, and they referred to themselves as their own brand. Now, this person that messaged me has, I don't know, a couple hundred followers, so not like a big influencer by any sort of metric, but they still refer to themselves as a brand as opposed to a human being. Is this sort of, it feels like a bit of a desperation for people to be celebrities from pretty much everywhere. Does that kind of take away the gloss of celebrities in general if everybody can consider themselves one via social media?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, it's a complete it's a demolition of the idea of a celebrity, because I mean, I think also, and I think it's an exhausting demolition because before, like I said, celebrities were, people in Hollywood, they were very far away. We didn't know anything about them. We didn't want to know what they have for breakfast and how their toilet looks like, and how their bathroom, and I think with this complete demystification of the celebrity, like I said, you almost make them too concrete. You give it, look at people like Marilyn or, I mean, to a certain point, you can even use people like Churchill is a celebrity, Stalin. I mean, or whatever. JFK was a celebrity. Yeah. These people are they're very mysterious. And the more mysterious somebody is, the more large of a projection surface he's for all of us. So I think these celebrities, I think it's true. There's kind of like I think we're in a very narcissistic kind of like moment right now. And I think it's funny how this Andy Warholish kind of like prediction that we're all going to be famous for 15 minutes. But what is it? What do we do then after half an hour? It's true. What's going to happen for all these people,
Yeah. It's a weird situation where people can feel entitled to other people's attention. Like that's the amazing thing with mobile phones and with social media in general. It's just this idea that you are deserving of someone else's time almost as an inherent right.
Exactly. And if you reverse that, you also see the fear of not having it, and the desperation behind it. But look, I mean, from a photographic point of view, since this is sort of like what we talk about, I think there's another huge kind of like, let's say a level that needs to be thought about, which is archives, I mean, from your grandmother to, like I said, Mary Pickford, the amount of images existing of these people was a negative. It was limited, Today, I think the number is that in 2 hours, more pictures are shot than in the first 150 years of photography combined. Now, and I'm not just talking about the incredibly quality that was shot in the 150 years of photography. We're talking Edward Weston, Edward Steichen, to Richard Avedon, and to Irving Penn. I mean, we also talking about the quantity. Who's going to archive all these pictures? They're meaningless. These celebrities today have not just a short shelf life. They will not be remembered because nobody's going to have a hard drive to collect millions and millions of TikTok videos and images and cat videos of them, or like selfies. I have no idea how are we going to look back at this in 20 years? Because if you think about it, your grandmother probably had 15, 20 pictures taken of herself in her life. One when she was a baby, one when she had a graduation, maybe in between something, maybe some birthday shots, one day on the beach. But, and these pictures were in a box and they were iconic. They were part of family history. How are the grandmothers of the 2030? With millions of photographs in more or less also semi-embarrassing, like lame situations. Where's this going to go? Because I think physically, literally, just purely from a technical point of view, we do not have the resources to store all these photographs. Nobody does. You change your iPhone two times and you're throwing away 40, 50,000 photographs, maybe more. When you talk about these people, they maybe have 100 followers, but I tell you, when you go on their phone, they have 150,000 pictures on their phone.
It's not good maths, whichever way you look at it.
It doesn't add up.
Okay, so can I ask about a couple of specific people that you photographed? Because I'm fascinated by a couple of subjects in particular. There's just, I could probably do this for hours, and I definitely don't want to do that to you, but there's a couple of people in particular I'd really like to pick out. One in particular who is someone who I find fascinating, and I feel like I don't know if they don't get the esteem or the respect they deserve from the general public as much as they should, but Mila Jovovich.
Yeah.
So yourself, Peter Lindbergh, Rankin, Ellen von Unworth have all produced amazing images, and there's got to be more than that of Mila. And what is it that she does that is she's got so much charisma and so much interest in a photo? What is it about Mila that makes her such a fantastic subject?
I tell you, Christopher, if I had an answer, the Kardashians would have already kind of like made a business out of it, and they would have probably sold it to people. There is a very fascinating thing that there's people, they have this connection with the camera, and I think we all sort of like thought about it. And, there is, I honestly, I saw this just, a while ago, I saw this documentary of Marilyn, and I think this one was actually pretty fascinating because somehow, there's all these lame documentaries of Marilyn, but this one interviewed a lot of people that they actually made her career, And there was apparently one guy, I think Marilyn had different affairs with different men who could be helpful for her, very kind of like Hollywood style. And there was one guy who kind of invented her name and kind of like, registered it and gave her some advice. I mean, it was just like they invented this idea. And Marilyn was a fairly short girl, and she just, and what he said is that he said, some people just come alive in the box. And some people die in the box, and the box has its own logic, box meaning the camera, There's quite a beautiful line from a French movie called Vie Privée, who's kind of a little bit biographical in the widest sense about Brigitte Bardot. And, she plays the role of a young dancer, and eventually somebody does some kind of like screen test of her. And when they do that, it's quite well done because they show her as a close-up, and then the camera pans out, and then you see her frame in the camera. And there's a voice that says something happened between her and the machine. And that's really what it is. I mean, with some people on very different levels, because I think Mila, for example, has a dark side and a strong, very masculine side, in front of the camera. And she's able to explore that. And Giselle has a very different side in front of the camera, and it also works, But I think these people, again, they be able to express something that connects with our longings. And I think I met the most beautiful women, and on camera, there's just nothing there. They're just pretty, There's nothing speaks to you. And often, sometimes I come into a studio and then you see these people in the morning, and they got some little bit greasy skin and they just washed, they got the wet hair, and you're thinking, I mean, without naming names, but I worked with, Oscar-winning Hollywood actors. But when you come into the dressing room in the morning, you're thinking, I don't know how the others did it, but this is not going to be easy, And you really panic.
Right.
And then in front of the camera, there is a life, a spark coming, and it's something coming from these people. It's insane, and nobody knows where it comes from. Give you a quick anecdote. I was booked on a job in Madrid to shoot Penelope Cruz, and I did a lighting test, and I had these really beautiful a flamenco dancer, whatever, just to kind of like check the light and to not to waste Penelope's time. That was okay. It was a little blend, but again, like a really like a stunning woman. And then, whatever, she switched and Penelope walked in, but the picture was nowhere near the same. She owns that frame, like her whole attitude. It's hers, And when you see cinema, you will see that sometimes when there's a scene with maybe 10, 15, sometimes 100 people, but you will look at one person. You will look at whatever, Sean Connery, in that James Bond scene when whatever, there's like a parade and there's 50 people like running left and right. But you look at Sean, he is the one who gets the magic,
Yeah.
And I think we all, like I said, I think, it's a bit like a question, what is real beauty? I've been often asked questions about beauty, but I think we have to leave things with a mystery. We like to explain things. But if you explain something, again, you always want to control it and conquer it and own it and market it and make it useful for you. And thank God, like this didn't work yet. We tried to market beauty with standards all over the place, but we still can't really explain it. You know what I mean? And I think it's the same thing for photogenic charisma,
Well, I'm not a fan of the word talented because I think that there's an implication with the word talented that it's somehow inherited through genetics or whatever. Yeah. It's not something that you've actually worked on. And there's that like expression about hard work beats talent. Well, I think people can be talented because of their hard work. So I don't mean talented in any kind of derogatory sense here, but you're an incredibly talented photographer. You have a incredible body of work. And when you work with, say, someone like you mentioned Charlize Theron or Monica Bellucci, I'm not a talented photographer in the slightest. I'm just someone that enjoys using a camera and is desperately trying to get good at it. But I can do portrait shoots with someone and it just clicks and they're fantastic at what they do. So they make my job very easy. And it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel. It's almost too easy to get something that you want out of the shoot. When someone of your sort of stature works with someone like Charlize Theron or Monica Bellucci, is it not almost too easy?
I mean, because it's really like shooting out of a moving train because already the conditions are so hard. I worked with some movie stars. And in the evening, I was looking at the hotel walls and I was thinking, how do people make a 6-month movie with this? How do they survive? It's emotionally so draining. There is so much insecurity, and there is agents and just, like I said, just the framework around it until you get there, until it's okayed, until the person, the PAs of these girls, the management, what you can wear, what they can do. And then it's them and then they don't feel good that day. And, I tell you, it's pretty. On the other side, the bar is really, really high. I mean, for example, when I shot Scarlett Johansson, everybody's like, wow, my God, you're going to shoot Scarlett Johansson. But when I shot her, she was already pregnant. She didn't feel great that day. She actually came from the hospital to the studio because she had these morning sicknesses, and she was not into it, which is understandable. She was pregnant. She had other things on her mind, but she committed to the shoot and I had to make the best out of it. And sometimes, and yeah, it's scarlet, but it also means that people say, show me what you got,
Right.
And then there's also two things, Christopher. As a photographer, you can always cater to the appearance. You can cater to the obvious. You can make a sexy naked girl look sexy, but what's the story you're telling with that? What's the story making a naked girl sexy? Your hamster can do it. So it's not necessarily what you signed up for. And then I think the question is, how do you create another level of this? How do you make it your picture of Monica? How do you make it a picture that is recognizable? How do you define that shot as your movie, your imagination? Again, how, a lot of people shot her, how do you, when that picture later is, how do you say that? But that was my interpretation of that day, because you don't have, 55, trials with these people. Maybe you meet them, once or three times in your life,
Yeah.
So, and it's not just that. One thing, I worked, for example, with Monica Bellucci over the years, but she's changing. When I met her, she had her first daughter, and I think the daughter was like not even a year old, maybe like 8-9 months. And then I shot her with a second kid. I shot her when she was pregnant. I shot her after and before the separation from her boyfriend or husband. They're going through different things, and they sometimes think they are forever, but you also see them changing, and you see that at a certain point they look more like that. And you have to capture it somehow. When you look at women like Romy Schneider or most movie stars, you're documenting part of their life.
Yeah.
So I do think, yes, you've been given a lot, but it's like, you better know what to do with it. And you have to really control the circumstances. And it doesn't always work, because you always have little time. They always want to rather leave than stay. They're not coming to the shoot and say, oh my God, I could spend 3 days here. For them, it's a press kind of like, arrangement. They have to shoot a cover. They have to do they have to promote a movie. This thing needs to get done.
Right. If I could change gears a little bit, then you do some directing of movement, essentially, compared to photography, which is much more static. How are you different in terms of your directional approach from directing video compared to photography?
It's very different. I was trying to do both in one day, but it's very different, because one thing is, it's really, a photograph needs to contain everything in itself. And you don't really tell people how long they're going to look at a photograph. It could be 1 second. It could be 10 minutes, With a film, you tell a story by putting different images in a juxtaposition, and there needs to be a value in the shot. There needs to be a positive or negative. And I think if you don't have that, it's boring. And I think most like fashion photography, or many people who just do short little films, they just want to have beautiful images, and they think, oh man, I'm just going to extend my pictures. But it's the same thing as every model I know think that she can just be an actress, and you're like, no, because people need a lot more than when they want to watch you for an hour and a half or longer, than when they pass by a billboard and they said, I want to go out with you.
Yeah.
There's more, the emotional process, the demands of a film, because you want to keep people's attention, are a lot higher, so you have to really think story, and it's not just about aesthetics, but again, it's a good training, because I like to think story whenever I shoot my films or my photography, but it's a different animal. And I think it's not to be mixed up. And I think, like I said, I know so many girls, they're really good models, really, really good models, and I think they all experience the transition to film as a lot more complex than you do, because, you need to stimulate curiosity and ambiguity. And a photograph's ambiguity works on very different levels, because it has to be in the shot. It doesn't have to happen right after,
Yeah. So, I mean, the approach has to be different, but in terms of the actual execution as well. Is it not also the case that when you're directing, you're collaborating a lot more? You're relying on a lot of other moving parts to work with you, as opposed to photography, which can be done pretty much in a one-to-one basis.
Yeah, I mean, like when I'm directing, I'm not doing the camera. I sometimes do one of the cameras, but I also felt that it feel, because I like to do it, but I also feel it's very distracting. When you're directing, you really need to step back and you watch it from far, you know, and you have to take a different levels of control, you know. Like I said, when like I said, there's so many different approaches to this. When I listen a lot to interviews, for example, from directors that I find fascinating, because like my influence from cinema is so strong. But one tells you really need to improvise, and the other one tells you, well, no improvisation will ever be better than what the writer came up with. Yeah. So stick to the script. Sidney Lumet says, I've never seen an actor that's a better writer than the writer that I hired. And I think, but that's probably a point, and then the other ones do a lot of ad lib because they say, no, I just wanted to happen out of the conditions, and some people do 50 takes because they say, I want you to sit in this chair like you sit in this chair 1,000 times,
Yeah.
But films are always closer to the human condition. I come from a fashion background, and I'm slowly having to work myself out of that aesthetic sugarcoating things,
I mean, do you look at the work of, like, in terms of cinema, like Nocturnal Animals, which was directed by Tom Ford? Do you look at work like that and see that as the kind of a good future for cinema in terms of people coming across from non-cinematic? I don't want to say non-cinematic backgrounds, but they specialize in something else and they bring something different to cinema, as opposed to cinema being very homogenous and very sort of cyclical in that you work in cinema, you produce films. It kind of becomes maybe a bit stagnant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the outside influences are good, but if I watch Tom Ford's movies, to me, they're incredibly fashionable, stylized. And I think that the character always, I mean, if you look at A Simple Man and you look at the hairstyle from, give me the name of the redhead.
Oh, yeah, you've caught me off guard as well.
Julianne Moore,
that's it.
And I think it's true. It's a reference. It's a great reference for fashion. But for me, it looks like a fashion editorial, And I'm sure there's stories some inside. But like I said, I mean, he had the means and the idea. And I think it works to a certain way. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's not Martin Scorsese. It that really lives through the story.
Yeah.
It's really about good cinema is really about the human condition. I think to a certain point, good photography is about the human condition. But then again, in fashion, it's a theater, and I think that theater can have certain, let's say, it has certain caprice, like moods. It can swing and it can be very surrealistic. It can be sarcastic. It can be grotesque. And it's interesting to watch. But I think, will it really stay with you? I think that's what I wonder,
Right.
And I think what matters so much in any photograph and even in a movie, but I think the rule for photography that, what matters is not what you see when you look at the picture. What matters is the feeling you walk away with. What something stays in you. And that's what communication is all about. And in the end, what we're talking about here is all communication, and I think you can be visually impressed and overwhelmed. You can watch a great film, especially right now with all these effects and superhero movies. And I think it can be very entertaining. But in the end, it didn't, when it's over, it's over. It doesn't really connect with you. Maybe, like there's some, whatever, James Bond movies, they're incredibly, you wouldn't walk out 5 minutes before it's over, some action movies. But when it's over, you don't take anything from it,
Yeah.
So I think what you take from anything, in the end, that's what that maybe become part of your emotional landscape. I think there's movies that really become part of your personal, subconscious landscape,
Yeah.
Like I said, that maybe the mythology, maybe, you know, the way it's been done, the way the countries, you know, maybe the characters, you identify yourself with them and maybe unconsciously even copy them or long about them, you know?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's someone that categorically hates comic book movies. I'm with you 100%. But I think, yeah, it's the communication part is kind of profound because I think a lot of people think of, especially photography, as being just an aesthetic. And I think I've been incredibly guilty of that. It's just an aesthetic. And to learn to communicate with it is actually probably significantly harder than anything technical that you could learn to do with a camera.
Yeah, but you see, you know, communication is always an emotional thing. I give you an example from art, which I think it's maybe that fits. Look, there's a painting from René Magritte, a surrealist. I think, you know, maybe let's say, you know, early 20th century, and it is a painting of a pipe, and it just says, "This is not a pipe." Okay, so what does he mean? It's not a pipe. It's a picture of a pipe. It's an interpretation of a pipe. It's his interpretation of a pipe. But then again, it's what we've known as a pipe. So we think it is a pipe. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So I think he makes a very good point here in saying what you see is not what it is. It's just a representation of it. And that representation has been emotionally digested and interpreted by the artists. So, you know, it's suggesting you, it's stimulating you somehow with something. But, you know, you can write under my photograph for Monica Bellucci, "This is not Monica Bellucci." You know, people be like, "Well, what do you mean? This is Monica." I'm like, "No, it's not Monica. This is a picture of Monica. And this is a picture I took on Thursday, you know, at 2:15 p.m. with my interpretation, my hair, my makeup, my angles, my lighting, you know?
Yeah.
Is it Monica? Somehow, yes. But it's not Monica. No, she's not there. She could be, when you meet her in a cafe, it's a completely different person. And I think within that emotional interpretation, I think that is really what defines the artistic process or communication in general. We mistaking what we see for what it is, you know?
Yeah.
And modern art, like since 150 years, tries to make the point that it said, no, it's this is not what it is. This is what I made of it. You know, this is what it made me feel.
Yeah. Well, I saw an interview quite a while ago now, I think probably pre-pandemic, so about 100 years ago, where Margot Robbie said that she hates when she goes to a photo shoot and they say to be herself. She doesn't want to be herself. She didn't become an actor to be herself. She wants to be given a role to play.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of actors will tell you that.
So this is what I wanted to ask you. Is that a common thing for you? Do you get asked to like give a role on a photo shoot?
Yeah. And that's why for me, it's often easier to work with women than with men because they don't want to be themselves, you know? And I think if you have a script, it's very easy for them, you know, and then they work themselves into a certain character, you know, and tell them, okay, look, you slammed the door, you kind of annoyed, you are this person, you're not yourself. And they're enjoying that, you know, it's child's play. You know, they you know, like I said, we just talked about James Bond or any other. These people pretending to save the world. It's like 5-year-olds, you know, but they're loving it. It's an enjoyable process, you know. But I mean, you know, you got to be a bit of a kid to walk around in front of a camera and fight some like muscle guy and say, "Oh, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you." It's a very childish thing to do for an actor, you know. But right. I think it's true. And if you have a photograph, it's more difficult because they are more confronted with who they are. You know, and men are not that playful with the camera. You know, they want to be more cool, but it brings them closer to who they are, and it makes all of us more nervous. Like I said, you know, I'm sometimes surprised that even the most media pro actors or celebrities, they know the violence of the camera. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is the fear or that idea that hangs over us, if the way we see ourselves is really who we are, or do other people see ourselves very different? And maybe what we see in the mirror is not really who we are, it's just what we think we are. I think that fear carries itself through the whole history of photography, because suddenly there is kind of like what has been defined as a realistic document. And when you think about, obviously, taking a black and white portrait, self-portrait, maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, was still, very much defined. But today you just turn your phone around and boom, you see yourself and you're thinking, oh man, I look horrible today, And I think the constant confrontation with who you are it's deeply changing your psychological sense of how do you define yourself in this world.
Yeah. So for you then, I mean, I know that I can't draw from my own experience because I certainly haven't done what you've done, but do you find that you are a different person on set? Like, do you play a role compared to who you are when you're at home, not being a photographer?
I think we always have a certain social code that we're employing, but I wish I would have. Honestly, I think, I should have played this better. I'm very focused on my work. If you play music, I wouldn't know what been played. I'm very I'm very, very focused on my angles. I think if you're a photographer, and you are, so when you're taking a picture, the hair, the light, the makeup, the angle, something doesn't work out, the shoulder looks awkward. You have to watch so many things, and sometimes the face is so beautiful. And then you kind of like look at the lower part of the frame and suddenly you feel that the hand was not good. It was kind of like a claw and you're like, fuck man, I can't use the shot because the hand was not relaxed. And then you have to kind of like try to recreate that beautiful face that was just right there in the light again, because it said something to you. It had this little bit like almost religious moment of like, of corresponding with the light. And I don't know, like I said, I mean, you probably have to ask somebody else, I guess it's the same way of like, if you go on a first date and you kind of try to be yourself, but the more you try, the less it probably works,
Yeah. I mean, you can't really try to be who you are because then you're influencing it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time that you've taken to do this. I've got 2 questions left and I promise I'll leave you in peace. You've already kind of touched upon one thing near the beginning, which was that point where you drove towards commercial work and you left behind personal work for a while, and you kind of threw yourself with sounded like a decent amount of spite towards doing things that made money as opposed to things that were more artistically inclined for yourself. At this point in your career, like today, what is the importance of personal work to you, and like how much of your work is personal?
I say my work shifted majorly. I think, what's funny, actually, because you mentioned social media, I was just probably what from me, most of it is almost all personal, because I started to do this Instagram thing really just because I was a little frustrated the way my work was printed and it was edited, and it was often the pictures that I really liked were left out and unpublished, or I was not happy with the layout. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this Instagram thing. I heard about few people doing it. Somebody told me about it in New York. And I said, hey, I can just show my pictures the way I am. And, like the way, and then at the same time, I started publishing books, but it was really just about a certain frustration of having maybe that general artist fear that the way people perceive you is not really what you want to communicate, because it's obvious, because obviously you get paid for it, and then other people take over the power, like a movie where you don't have director's cut, and it's been edited by others, and somehow then this Instagram thing got so big, and I think today hardly anybody looks at websites. Nobody looks at magazines anymore. And I'm still publishing books and I'm very happy with it. But I think most of the people know me through Instagram. And I at some point I put this line on top of my account and I said, this is personal. I mean, you just need to remember that, But in a way, it's really what I like to do. So I corner myself again with this old artistic demon on my shoulder that I know photography is also a service, is also something that you solve. I like. I don't mind commercial photography. It's not a dirty word for me. It's interesting. It got me a lot of access. And I don't mind doing it. Because like I said, you've been confronted with a certain assignment. But I think, we both know that magazine photography is completely breaking apart right now, which is a whole other subject to discuss,
Yeah.
Which I think is very dramatic, because I think it was really an art form. Like I said, and what I mentioned before, I think people don't realize that digital photography is not archivable, not in the amount of the way it's been used. Who's going to do the selection? So, there's been major changes in photography that are happening as we speak,
Yeah.
And also, you have to say those bigger photographers you talked about, Lindbergh or Newton or Avedon, they all had a very strict business model through their entire career. And most of them, they turned almost 90 years old. But it was the Condé Nast system. Sometimes they shot a little bit more Vogue or Bazaar, and sometimes they shot a little bit less. But that was always the benchmark. And today nobody really cares if you shoot for Vogue, because there's much better channels to distribute, but then these channels are not regulated, and they have no production means, and they might have very different interests. They might be interested in your information and not even in the photographs.
Yeah.
So
well, I think markets fluctuate, right, based on technology a lot of the times. Like, technology improves and people think anything that isn't the most up-to-date technology automatically falls by the wayside and is no longer valuable in the slightest. And then I guess like what we've seen with film photography in the last 5 years, what we've seen with vinyl in music in the last few years, and I think film in cinema is starting to see this as well, is people realize, there's actually value to stuff that isn't the most recent technology for reasons beyond just ease of use and convenience. And perhaps...
And commercial pressure, because I mean, if you walked 5 years ago, if an agent says, "Oh yeah, my photographer shoots digital and it's all really great," and he's like top of the line, nobody asked about, but how many meg does his image really have? What's the information? No creative director or no person in the advertising agency, was aware that his images from like, let's say 7 years ago, the resolution was really terrible. These images are complete. If I would have shot, you mentioned Monica Bellucci. I think I shot some of the last nudes from Monica, because then she had the second child and she kind of like stopped doing it. If I would have had those images on digital, I mean, they had 15 meg maybe, I would have not even be able to do a magazine size print of it today, because, it was pixelated.
Yeah.
So I think, we also been through a lot, but I think in our market, in the fashion, you always, because we're all freelancers and we're always so afraid that we constantly feel the pressure of, there's a term that I really like. It's called dynamic stabilization. And I think what it means is very much related also today for the Instagram. What doesn't grow can't remain. That means you cannot be who you are. You constantly have to post growth. So a photographer who doesn't update his website, who doesn't have new followers, has constantly the fear of falling behind, but it's the same for a country, it's the same for if Japan doesn't have growth, if Greece doesn't have growth, okay, they're going to run in trouble, they're not going to, then they have to post even more growth the next year because, they're not going to be able to pay the pensions and maybe not whatever, the whole social system is going to be in dire. So I think we're living in a general social system where you can't remain what it is. Only growth justifies the existence, which puts a huge pressure on us. And you can see a technology you constantly need in your phone, and we photographers constantly need an update right now. I shoot a lot of pictures with my dad's camera, And people probably realized in the industry that you don't make a lot of money if photographers use the camera from their fathers,
Yeah.
Well, the pictures are technically, they're perfect. I mean, you probably shoot digital, how many updates you need on your cameras, how much software do you need, How long does it last until you need to buy a new one?
Yeah, that's the problem with putting your faith in the hands of people that create new technology, is that they're incentivized to constantly replace something as quickly as possible to make as much money. So yeah, it's an interesting, I think we're at quite an interesting point in history with art and photography in general, because I feel like we're in a very strange time. This is way too big of a point to make towards the end of a podcast, because I think this is something that you could educate me on for an hour. But it feels like we're at this weird junction where everybody's anti-capitalist, but also everyone's trying to commercialize every aspect of every part of their life. So
yeah, which is a bit like the general idea of digitalization, I mean, I think, you're not going to find one politician that's not going to tell you that we're going to go more digital. On the other side, all of us are happy if we walk into a bank and we kind of like get a real person on the phone somewhere, But let me tell you one last thing about the digital thing, because I do think it's an interesting or an important point to make in photography. If you change, because people just say, oh, it's just a digital camera, it's the same thing, just shoot the same girl, use the same light. But if you change the procedure that much, you will also change the result. And you will not take the same picture in digital you take in analog. And I give you the same thing in another example. If you write a letter, you will, and you're just writing the same person and you're having the same thoughts, and you have the option to use a text message or even an email, it will not be the same words, and you will express yourself differently. And also the return from that person, because it's more immediate, will be very different than if you have to write a letter, kind of like put it in an envelope, go to the post office, wait a week until you get something back, if you do get something back. But if you, and I do think analog photography is more of writing a letter, because you're not aware of the immediate results. You need to send it off. It takes time, And in that time, something happens. In time, always something happens, And if you take time away, it's a different process. So digital photography didn't change photography technically. It changed photography aesthetically and emotionally, And I don't know if it changed for the better, if you ask me, but, I might have a bit of a radical view on that, because I don't think microwaved food went for the better,
Yeah. No, that's the comparison right there. All right. So last question. And I'm really hoping I don't put you in too much of a corner with this one, but I feel like this is a bit of a fun one to end on.
Tell me.
Okay. So let's say right now, for whatever reason, I have the ability to tell you that tomorrow will be the last day that you'll ever do photography.
Ooh.
Now, you can carry on taking pictures of like family and friends and so on from then on, but your last ever photo shoot is tomorrow, and you can only pick one person who you've already photographed. Who would you pick?
I can have everyone?
No.
That's difficult. I don't know, because like I said, I mean, time moved on, I was in May or June. I was in LA for a while because of this whole Corona situation. I was working with Adriana Lima in Hollywood, and it's true. I love taking pictures of her. Now I've done it. Every time I tell my agent or anybody who knows me, it's like, oh yeah, you shot Adriana again. I'm like, come on, guy. I mean, how can you? You go to Hitchcock and you said, oh, you're shooting Grace Kelly again? Oh yeah, what's that gonna be like? You're another blonde. But I think I get the photo. I get often with her. I get the photograph I really like to take. And even, it's not an easy one to get in front of the camera anymore. But, it's true. I loved working with Monica, but then again, Monica right now, it's a different Monica than the one I met 15 years ago, when she was jumping around naked on the beach. Now she's a mom of two more or less grown children, and her daughter is kind of like becoming a model.
Yeah.
So there's processes, so... like I said, photography in many ways is so related to the time itself. I'm not the same person either I used to be when, I was with Monica on the beach of Biarritz, but maybe also sometimes you idolize certain time periods, but there's definitely people I like to photograph. But if you ask me from the ones I already shot, I would like to shoot maybe Scarlett again, because there's some shots I really like, but I think it was a difficult day for both of us. And I think I kind of like botched it a little bit, so.
Well, I mean,
it's a horrible, you're putting a horrible idea in my mind that I could never take another picture, because it's like,
I'm a bad person. I do apologize.
I tell you the truth. There was a time when I was told, when Polaroid disappeared. And there was a time when it was kind of like up in the air if Kodak is going to continue doing film. And I was really, really asking myself, what am I going to do if film is not going to be produced anymore, because I knew I wouldn't be a digital photographer. It's just not, I just can't, it's just, it doesn't emotionally, it doesn't speak to me.
Where did you land on that? Where did you think you'd end up if film stopped?
It was really a very difficult, it was like having a major accident and really having to change your life. I was really worried about that. I probably would have moved to film, Yeah. But again, it's just a very frightening. It's kind of like asking you, what are you going to do when your home burns down, with all the memories and everything in it? Where are you going to go? Like, you kind of like lose everything that you build up on, somebody pulls the rug under your feet,
Yeah, it's I think that I need to reevaluate the way that I end interviews, because I feel like I'm being too much of a bully.
No. You're asking very interesting questions. I like the conversation,
Well, like I've said about 1,000 times already, I'm so grateful that you took the time to do this, and that you've given up what could have been a very good day to instead spend your time talking to someone like me. It's so appreciated.
No, Kris, I'm really, there's nothing better than sharing ideas about photography. That's what I live for. And you know what? I tell you one thing, no matter who you are, and I met a lot of people, they were maybe very, let's say, they outranked others in fame or attention or money. But I think the same rule applies to everyone. And you know what? Look, I'm just a photographer. I'm really nothing special. I'm just taking pictures, but never believe that you are what other people think you are. Then you're really losing it, Right. So I think, as long as you have a connection to yourself, you do not think that you are that person that other people think you are. Because again, what we said earlier, they may be projecting something on you that, that is far from reality. So, what better way to do? And sorry if I contradict you in that, than, be talking about photography with somebody, on a gray winter day, so.
Well, I live in England. Every day is a grey winter day, so this is basically how our summer looks. So it makes no difference. But for the 3 people that don't know where to find your work, where's the best place that you'd like to send them to see it? Website, Instagram, and so on. It's probably Vincent Peters 1. There you have a pretty wide selection. Even though it's very painful for me that my photographs are the size of a teaspoon. But have a look at, I just did this book called Selected Work, a collector's edition. Amazing book, really amazing book.
And I'm quite happy with the printing, actually, even though there was quite a story behind this whole thing. But yeah, the book is out, and it's that would be my preferred way of, because it's tangible. Yep. I think if like I said, I guess, we're losing the sense of things being tangible today. But if you just want to have a quick look of what I do, look at it, Vincent Peters 1 on Instagram,
And definitely, if you're a real photographer, check out vincentpetersstudio.com as well, because like you said, I'm kind of sick of looking at images that are the size of a teaspoon. Like, if you're a real photographer, sit down, actually spend some time looking at photography rather than just swiping on your phone while you're supposed to be watching a film or something.
Yeah.
Huge, unbelievably huge thank you for you taking the time to do this. I can't thank you enough.
No problem, Christopher. My pleasure, really.